Enter the House Between, Reality Television and the Multiverse. Enter the House Between, written by John Muir, is what happens if you take a reality television series, put it in a multiverse, and have a space-traveling future dystopia as the lowercase p plot. These three things shouldn't go together. Strangely enough, in this instance, they do. Mimesis, realism, and verisimilitude. Mimesis is different from verisimilitude, which in turn is different from realism. Verisimilitude is the, quote, formal or technical representation or imitation of the real world in art and literature, according to the New Oxford American English U.S. Dictionary. Mimesis, on the other hand, is sometimes seen as a tool that creates verisimilitude. Perhaps a similar concept is the difference between the words affect and effect. You see effects while you affect something. One can't effect change just as someone cannot have an affect on this world. When I say this audio drama has elements of a reality TV series, I merely mean the tropes found in such television can be found in Enter the House Between. Elements like scandalous love, deceit, and distrust feel like the bread and butter of the series. Food high in sodium and carbs and with little nutritional value. Reality television and character interaction. When someone says reality television in everyday conversation, some people will roll their eyes and imagine the worst shows in that genre. Saying something is like a reality TV show has often the same effect. There have been many successful podcasts with realistic elements, just look at the true crime genre, that aren't your typical interview or roundtable discussion on a specific topic type of podcast. The relationships between characters are easy to comprehend, as are the individual characters themselves. Arlo is the reluctant chosen one of sorts, Bill is a scientist, Teresa is a psychic with a robotic personality, and Astrid is Bill's lover. Some characters are more fleshed out than others. Astrid doesn't really have a defining trait aside from the love interest and maybe her jealousy. Regardless, it's not passing any sort of Bechdel test. At least the transitions between episodes are seamless, like a high-concept music album. Moon Knight with a side of truth or dare. Episodes toward the end feel like they belong in a different story. It's both an example of the writer's hand being visible, but also an interesting way to get across exposition. These episodes start with one that's ripped right from the Moon Knight Disney Plus show. If you're familiar with its hard left, House Between copies that concept, but changes the number of people it affects. You aren't sure what's real, but you also learn a lot about the characters. Things that wouldn't have divulged otherwise. Things that perhaps recontextualize the plot points that came before. While the sound effects and music are good, the story lacks a certain narrative thread. At times, it's all over the place, with poker games, space pirates, and artificial intelligent houses. AIs are known as LARs in this world. It's a classic example of throwing the kitchen sink along with the baby and the bathwater. 7 out of 10 stars. The Madness of Chartrulian. Dune-inspired Shakespeare in space. The tragedy of Darth Chartrulian between Star Wars and Dune. There is a clear Dune influence on this story's world. It feels like Dune fanfiction with the names adjusted a little, or the same concept given a new name. Arcus is Arrakis, spice is called the Zuria, and the Kwisatz Haderach from Dune is the Etruvian. There is also a Star Wars vibe to the story, in particular the politics of the prequel trilogy with a dash of the fantasy and space aesthetic from the original. Without the science fiction classics influence on the audio drama, the story demands a deep dive to simply understand what's happening. This may turn some people off. If you aren't knee-deep in science fiction and fantasy worlds, this over 8-hour first season probably isn't for you. Being ankle-deep in the pool of sci-fi fantasy fandoms might not be enough, even with the similarities between it and Dune doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Too many characters, not enough plot. Part of the reason the story is hard to follow is because there are so many characters that we barely see or hear from, but that have a huge impact on the plot. Without a doubt, I probably missed some scenes with these named and sparsely appearing characters. However, you really have to love a series if you want to go back and listen to it all over again, especially when it's 8 hours and 4 minutes of content. To say a lot goes on is an understatement. The shifting between characters and their locations give the listener whiplash. If you aren't paying attention for even 30 seconds, you probably miss something, and getting back into the flow of the episode becomes that much harder the longer your mind wanders. Even when your mind is fully committed to the story, the plot of Chartrulian has more in common with a series of vignettes and scenes than a story with an overarching plot. There is one, but not a lot of time is spent on it directly. This feels like the first part of a two-part story. Chartrulian as Space Messiah, and autistic savant. Going out on a limb, but I'm positive Chartrulian is autistic, with the title character being a messiah for a group of marginalized people, adding the overused and harmful savant archetype found commonly in stories featuring autistic character or characters. This could be my headcanon, but I don't think I'm alone in this regard. The best way to describe Chartrulian is with the word Asperger's. Yes, I'm aware of its history with the Nazis and World War II, however, I can't think of a better term to efficiently illustrate Chartrulian's character than that word. Whether the creators purposely meant to make him have Asperger's, Chartrulian does have a lot of traits that line up with the developmental disability now folded into the autism spectrum disorder or ASD diagnosis. 8 out of 10 stars.